طيب الحمد لله وحده والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعد نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن اقتفى أثره واستنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين. Inshallah, we'll continue with reading from the book known as the Musannaf of Abdur-Razzaq. The Musannaf of Abu Bakr Abdur-Razzaq ibn al-Hammam al-San'ani rahimahullah ta'ala, who died in the year 211 after the Hijrah. And we reached the chapter Bab Hurmatu Ramadan. لا باب الحقنة في رمضان والرجل يصيب أهله. Chapter regarding getting a shot during the month of Ramadan and regarding a man who has sexual relations with his family. قال Abdur-Razzaq عن ابن جريج عن عطاء أنه كره أن يستدخل الإنسان شيئا في رمضان بالنهار فإن فعل فليبدل يوم ولا يفطر ذلك اليوم. He said that Abdur-Razzaq said on the authority of Ibn Jurayj, on the authority of Ata, that he used to dislike that a person enter anything inside of his body during the daytime of Ramadan. And if a person were to do that, then he should replace that day and he should not break his fast for the rest of the day. And this is regarding a person who enters something into their body from a method other than eating or drinking. So we know that eating and drinking breaks the fast. The question is if a person enters something inside of their body from another method, like through a shot that goes intravenously straight into their veins, or if they put it in through their backside, for example, or through saturation, for example. We'll see, like in the Musannaf of Ibn Abi Shayba, he has a chapter regarding the one who moistens a rag and puts it on his face or on his body, or pours water on his bed and lays in it. Because these different methods, or they have a topical cream or something like that nowadays, like for medicine, where there might be a topical cream, or somebody who's trying to quit smoking and they wear a tobacco patch. Do these things nullify their fast? Because all of these things, they're not eating or drinking, nor are they similar to eating and drinking, but they enter something inside of your body. And so the question is does entering something inside of your body, does it negate your fast? And so this is Ata. He disliked that a person enter anything inside of their body during the daytime of Ramadan. So eye drops, topical creams, patches, saturation, however it might get inside. And if a person did that, Allah would tell them to replace that day. They need to fast another day, but he would also tell them to not break the rest of their day, to not break their fast for the rest of the day, i.e. until Maghrib. And this was to be on the safe side, right? The replacement of the day is to be on the safe side, and the not breaking the fast for the rest of the day is because the unsurety of if that was something that nullified their fast. So you have to continue to fast because it's the daytime of Ramadan. But because you're not sure if it broke your fast, then make that day up. وهذا قول عطاء. قال عبد-الرزاق عن الثوري قال يفطر ذلك الذي يحتقن بالخمر ولا يضرب الحد. الثوري, Abdur-Razzaq said on the authority of الثوري, he said, يفطر الذي يحتقن الخمر, the person who gets a shot of alcohol. And here what he means by a shot of alcohol is an injection. They put the alcohol directly into their veins, right? And so nowadays we have drugs and things like this, like topical creams, things, that can get a person intoxicated. Similar to that was an individual in the past shooting up alcohol. Athawri rahimahullah ta'ala, he said that this breaks the fast of the person who does so. If a person injects alcohol directly into their body without drinking it, then this breaks their fast. But Athawri, he gave us another benefit. He said, وَلَا يُضْرَبُ حَدًّا, but he does not, or لَا يُضْرَبُ الْحَدِّ, he does not get the punishment that was legislated for this. He should not be beaten, which is the Islamic punishment for one who gets intoxicated, who drinks alcohol. So the entering it into his body breaks the fast, but it doesn't carry the same punishment as one who drinks alcohol. And a benefit there is to show that the Salaf, they differentiated between eating and drinking and things that weren't the same. And like this nowadays, we have similar conversations, right? An IV, topical creams, eye drops, asthma inhalers, things like this, where nobody considers those actions, eating or drinking, do they nullify the fast? And this is why there is disagreement in those issues. And so some people would say yes, and some people would say no, because there's a disagreement. Is that eating or drinking? Or even if there's no disagreement, there's a disagreement. Is it similar to eating and drinking? And so like this, authority, even though he says it does break the fast, he's showing us that there is a difference between it and eating and drinking. He says, قال Abdur-Razzaq and Thawri and Asim ibn Ubaidillah ibn Asim and Abdullah ibn Amir ibn Rabi'ah and Abihi أنه قال رأيت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يستاك وهو صائم ما لا أحصي. He says that Abdur-Razzaq said on Thawri, on the authority of Asim ibn Ubaidillah ibn Asim, on the authority of Abdullah ibn Amir ibn Rabi'ah, on the authority of his father radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, who said, I saw the Prophet, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, more than I could count, using miswak while he was fasting. I saw the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam using miswak while he was fasting more than I could count. And the relevance of this is that a person using miswak, he's not eating or drinking. Nobody says about that person that he is eating or drinking. He is using miswak. Nobody considers using miswak eating or drinking. Nobody would say to you, if you had miswak in your mouth cleaning your tooth, why are you eating miswak? They would say, why are you cleaning your teeth? And so this person has this item in his mouth. And from what is known is that the miswak, the siwak, it will, it will crumble and break apart. And maybe some of the fibers get inside of his throat and end up inside of him. And so in that circumstance, does this person break their fast or not? Remember, we said that a Thawri, or should we say Ata, he said he disliked for anybody to enter anything into their body during the daytime of Ramadan. And the person who uses the siwak, he's entering something inside of his body. And especially if we talk about the crumbling fibers that come off as he's cleaning his teeth. So one might say that those things nullify the fast. While somebody else might reply, well, this was the Prophet ﷺ using miswak more than the Sahabi could count. And he didn't consider it to be something that broke his fast, even though that it's most likely that those fibers got into his throat and into his stomach, because that is the norm when using miswak. But because that's not eating and drinking, it doesn't break the fast. And so this would be the proof of the people who held the alternative position that if it's not eating and drinking, it does not break the fast. They said, عن Abdur-Razzaq عن ابن جريج عن عطاء أنه قال إذا أصاب إنسان أهله في قضاء رمضان أبدل ذلك اليوم وليس عليه كفارة قلت فباشرها قال ويبدل ذلك اليوم ولا يفطر. Abdur-Razzaq said on the authority of Ibn Jurayj, on the authority of Ata, who said that if a man has relationship with his family during the day that he was making up of Ramadan, then he just needs to replace that day. And he does not have to give another expiation. Ibn Jurayj, he said, I said, but he had intercourse with her. Ata, he said, he just needs to replace that day, wala yuftir. And he should not break his fast for the rest of the day, right? So this is regarding an individual who, while making up a day of Ramadan, has intercourse on that day of makeup. We know that if an individual has intercourse on the daytime of Ramadan, then they have to do the kafara. فَإِتْقُ رَقَبَةٍ أو صيام شهرين متتابعين أو إطعام 60 مسكينا. Right? They either have to free a slave or fast 2 consecutive months, or they have to feed 60 poor people. This is if they have intercourse during the daytime of Ramadan on purpose. But if a person was traveling and broke their fast permissibly, Or a person was sick and so they didn't fast, and this is permissible. Or a woman was on her period and so she didn't fast, and this is permissible. They now have days that they have to make up. During these days that they have to make up, instead of completing the day that they started, and this leads us to another conversation, which is, do you have to complete your fast once you begin? And there are a large number of scholars who go to the opinion that once you begin the act of worship, then you have to complete it. And some of them say, as it relates to voluntary acts of worship, then no. Once you start them, you don't have to complete them. But obligatory acts of worship, once you start them, you have to complete them. And so this day of making up Ramadan is an obligatory action. And so once you start that fast, you now have to complete it. You can't change your mind in the middle of the day and say, you know what, I'll make it up tomorrow. So now that we've said you have to complete this fast that you're making up the day for, but during that day you succumb and you have intercourse with your wife. If this was during the daytime of Ramadan, you would have to pay the kafara, free a slave, fast 2 consecutive months, or feed 60 poor people. But this day is a makeup day of Ramadan, and it is not during Ramadan. So does the same rule apply? Here, Ata is saying no. You only have to make up the day itself. And Ibn Jurayj, he questioned that. He says, but a person is having intercourse while fasting Ramadan. And for some of them, the makeup has the same rule as the thing that it's being made up for. So when you're performing a makeup prayer, it has all of the same rules as the prayer that you missed. Like we covered in the Muwatta, that make it up the way you would have prayed it. And the same could be said about fasting, that you need to make it up the way you would have fasted in the beginning. And so that would lead one to believe that if they commit intercourse during a day where they're making up a day that they missed of Ramadan, that they would have to therefore pay the kafara. But Ata, he replied by saying no, he should just simply replace that day, and he should not break his fast for the rest of the day. And that's because Ata, he used to make a person continue fasting even if he told the person to make that day up. And as we mentioned, that's because the general principle is, in his view, that it's still the daytime of Ramadan. And so you committed a mistake by breaking your fast, and you now have to make that day up, but that doesn't justify you not fasting the rest of the day, because it is still the daytime of Ramadan. نعم. قال Abdur-Razzaq عن ابن جريج قال سمعت عطاء يرخص للإنسان ظمأ في قضاء رمضان أن يفطر. قال ابن جريج وأمرت إنسانا فسأله أن أينزل قضاء رمضان بمنزلة التطوع قال نعم. Here is another statement that is the alternative opinion of what we just mentioned tangentially about, do you have to complete the act of worship once you begin, especially the obligatory act of worship. And so Abdur-Razzaq, he said on the authority of Ibn Jurayj, he said, I heard Ata giving permission to a person who was thirsty during the daytime of Ramadan, during the daytime of a day that he was making up of Ramadan, to break his fast. And so Ibn Jurayj, he said, and I commanded another person, and so that person asked Ata, do we consider the make-up days to be equivalent to voluntary days of fasting? To which Ata said, yes. So this is a hadith on the alternative opinion of what Ata just mentioned recently. We said that here, Ibn Jurayj, he says, I heard Ata giving permission to a person who was extremely thirsty, dhami'a. He became parched during the daytime of a day that he was making up of Ramadan. Ata gave that person permission to break his fast. And so we see that that's completely opposite of what he told the person who had intercourse, that he needs to make up that day. Because there's no difference between eating, drinking, and intercourse as regards to being necessities. and this is a principle that some people often overlook. Eating, drinking, and intercourse are all necessities of life, right? Some people might consider that eating and drinking are necessities, while intercourse is a want or a need. But the reality of it is that it's a necessity of life. And for that reason, we see so many rules connected to it, that the individual who has a child, for example, who is in need of intercourse, the parent has to pay for a wife. The man who is in need of more intercourse than one wife can suffice. It's obligatory upon him to take a second, because intercourse is just as necessary as food and drink. And that's the reason that it's something that is left off during the daytime of Ramadan, just like food and drink. And so in the first narration, Ata, he made the individual who found himself compelled to commit intercourse to make up that day. But when it came to the individual who was compelled to drink, Ata gave him the permission to break his fast that day. And so this could seem contradictory from Ata, or it could seem that he didn't consider the person who had intercourse to be compelled to do so, while being extremely parched is a compelling reason. Or it could be different people giving them different rules. And this is something that scholars do at times when they look at the condition of the person and the circumstance of a person. They make a judgment based on their knowledge of the person's situation. And it leads some credence to this, the action of Ibn Jurayj after that. So when he heard Ata give the person permission to break their fast who was extremely parched when making up a day of Ramadan, Ibn Jurayj says, and I told someone to go ask him. وَأَمَرْتُ إِنسَانًا. Ibn Jurayj didn't ask himself. And this is because Ibn Jurayj is a student. He's a high student of Ata, and somebody who Ata potentially would hold to a higher standard. So he might give him the answer based on what he knows about his situation, as opposed to somebody who is of a lesser standard or a lesser capability. Their obligation might be different in that regard. And this isn't something that is done to alter the religion for different people, but instead it's the fact that the religion considers the circumstances of different people. And I remember once sitting with one of our teachers in Medina, and he was giving a talk about how to give fatwa. And you can also find similar statements from the statements of Uthaymeen and things like that, about from the things that are needed in giving a fatwa is knowledge of the question that you're being asked, as well as knowledge of the condition of the one that that's asking you, as well as knowledge on how to put the two of them together. And a lot of times people, they don't consider this point when answering questions. If somebody comes and asks you, is eating pork haram? Then the answer has details. Yes, it's haram, except in this and this and that circumstance. And so when giving the answer, you need to know the condition of the person that's asking you, because the answer might be different in his circumstance. And so potentially this is why Ata gave two answers that could seem to be contradictory. Or one of the other reasons that we mentioned, that he didn't see intercourse and eating to be the same in their necessity, or that he knew something about the person specifically that would have led him to make this answer. But because Ibn Jurayj, being the student that he is and the scholar that he was, he didn't ask Ata himself, but instead he had somebody else ask, so that Ata would give the answer to the person without considering the quality of Ibn Jurayj. And so Ibn Jurayj, he said, so I commanded a person, and so they asked him, should we treat the makeup days of Ramadan like voluntary days of fasting? To which Ata said yes. And this statement has a couple of benefits in it if we take it on its apparent nature. should we treat the makeup days like voluntary days? We know that Ramadan, the days of Ramadan and voluntary fasting, they're different rules. What's a different rule between voluntary fasting and Ramadan? Do you know of any of the different rules between voluntary fasting and Ramadan? For example, Ramadan, we say you have to make your intention from the night before. While voluntary fasting, you can make your intention during the day. So here, when this person is saying to Ata, should we treat the makeup days of Ramadan like the voluntary fast, the apparentness of his statement is that you could make your intention in the middle of the day for a makeup day. So if it got to Maghrib or it got to Dhuhr, according to some, and you hadn't eaten or drinking yet, and you decide, you know what, I'm gonna make up this day, I'm gonna use today as a makeup day for Ramadan, this would be an opinion of some scholars that you can. Well, other scholars say no, the makeup day has to be treated the same way as the original day. Another benefit in it is the benefit that the author brought the narration for, which is the voluntary act of worship. Besides Hajj, once you start it, you can change your mind and stop. So if you start praying the sunnahs and then you say, you know what, I need to go get something to eat, and stop, that's okay, because it's a voluntary act of worship. You can go and come to it as you please. As far as the obligatory acts of worship, then there is a strong opinion that says, no, once you start them, you can't stop them. So if you were making dhuhr and you were on the first rak'ah, and then you said, you know what, I'm still hungry, let me go back and finish my meal, right? You can't stop it once you start it. And so if that is the case, then that's what Ata referenced in the previous narration when he told the person to make that day up. But in this narration, he says the makeup day is equivalent to a voluntary day of fasting, meaning that you can start the makeup day and then during the middle of it, change your mind and say, you know what, I'm gonna make it up tomorrow. And so you can eat and drink after that. And like we said, it does seem to be contradictory to the previous opinion that he mentioned about intercourse on a makeup day. Does the person have to pay the kafara? He said no, but they have to make that day up. But as we mentioned, that could be potentially because of different circumstances or because of what he sees between the two, i.e. eating and drinking and intercourse and difference, or because what he knew about the situation of the one who asked him. طيب. The next chapter he says, Bab al-rajulu yud'a ila ta'amin wa huwa sa'im. If we're talking about having to complete the fast once you start, specifically the voluntary fast, or we can add to it the makeup fast. If we say that you have to complete the fast once you start, what about if somebody invites you to a meal? Can you break your fast for that? We know that responding to the invitation is mandatory. And completing your fast, if it was obligatory, like a day making up for Ramadan, is mandatory. Or if it's a voluntary fast, completing it is preferable and not stopping. So what do we do in this situation if we are fasting in a time where it is not wajib, right? It's not Ramadan. Either it's a makeup day or it's a voluntary fast. What do we do if somebody invites us to a meal? This chapter is about a man who was invited to a meal while fasting. قال Abdur-Razzaq and Ma'mar and الزهري وقتادة قال إذا دعي إنسان إلى طعام وهو صائم فليقل إني صائم. Abdur-Razzaq said on the authority of Ma'mar, on the authority of Az-Zuhri, as well as Qatada. The two of them said if an individual is invited to a meal while fasting, he should say, I'm fasting. And so these two individuals, Az-Zuhri and Qatada, held the view that you should continue in your fast. And their statement also gives us the benefit of knowing that we can announce to people that we're fasting and it doesn't invalidate our fast. Right? You can tell somebody I'm fasting and it doesn't reduce it from an aspect of showing off. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, if an individual fights you, then say, inni sa'im. Right? And so if somebody invites you to a fast and you want to continue to do so, then you should let them know that I'm fasting. And in telling them that you're fasting, it's something that comforts their heart. Because a lot of times if a person invites you to a meal, to reject it could cause them concern and trouble in their heart. We see that Ibrahim alayhi salatu wassalam, when those two angels came to him, وَقَرَّبَ إِلَيْهِمْ إِجْلٌ سَمِينٌ, and he presented to them a healthy ram to eat. When they didn't eat, أَوْجَسَ فِي نَفْسِهِ خِيفَةً, he got scared and he got offended and depressed and bothered by them not eating. And so from the benefits is that if you're not going to partake in someone's food, comfort them in a way that lets them understand it without being offended. So if you're fasting and you don't want to go to the meal, don't just say, no, not right now, akhi, maybe tomorrow. Let them know, inni sa'im, I'm fasting today. So that way they don't find anything in their chest against you. He says, Abdur-Razzaq and Thawri and Abi Ishaq and Qais ibn Abi Hazim and Ibn Mas'ud رضي الله تعالى عنه أنه قال إذا عرض على أحدكم طعام أو شراب وهو صائم فليقل إني صائم. On the authority of Abdur-Razzaq, on Thawri, on Abi Ishaq, on the authority of Qais ibn Abi Hazim, on the authority of Ibn Mas'ud, who said if it's presented to one of you all food or drink while he is fasting, then he must say, I am fasting. And this is if the individual is not going to break their fast, then they should say, I am fasting. And we see, like, for example, in the Musannaf, if not in this book, but I think in the Musannaf of Ibn Abi Shaybah, he actually words this chapter like that, saying, I am fasting. Because the way that Abdur-Razzaq worded the chapter, it left it open for two different conversations. Should you break your fast or not? But he didn't talk about that. He just talked about what to say if you're not going to break your fast. And so you'll see that sometimes the way they word the chapter could have been more precise. Babu siwak lis-sa'im, chapter regarding using siwak or miswak for the person who is fasting. قال أخبرنا عبد-الرزاق قال أخبرنا الثوري عن عاصم بن عبيد الله بن عاصم عن عبد الله بن عامر بن ربيعة عن أبيه أنه قال رأيت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يستاك وهو صائم ما لا أحصيه. Right, we just covered this narration a moment ago. Abdur-Razzaq, he said that Thawri informed us on the authority of Asim ibn Ubaidullah ibn Asim, on the authority of Abdullah ibn Amir ibn Rabi'ah, on the authority of his father, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, who said, I saw the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam using siwak while fasting more than I could count. And so using miswak is permissible while fasting. Putting something into your mouth is permissible. Cleaning your teeth is permissible. And the position of some of the scholars that it's permissible before dhuhr, then there's no clear evidence for that. And the reason why they restrict it to being before dhuhr is because they say after dhuhr, the acids and the smells that happen in your stomach start to find their way to your mouth. And the bad breath or the khuluf of a fasting person is more pleasant to Allah than the smell of misk. And so by cleaning your teeth, the miswak has an acid in a way that combats that smell that happens in your mouth. It's something that pleases the Lord and cleans the mouth. That being the case, there's no reason to say that the khuluf of the person who used miswak isn't just as pleasing to Allah as the one who didn't. So there's no reason to say that you can't use it after dhuhr. And this Sahabi, Amir ibn Rabi'ah, he used to say that I saw the Prophet ﷺ using miswak while fasting more than I can count. And so that would show by default an abundance of its usage. Another benefit in this is that, as we mentioned earlier, that when you use the siwak, it has a flavor. And that flavor doesn't break your fast, even though you're tasting it in your mouth. The taste in your mouth is the flavor. The flavor doesn't have anything. The flavor doesn't have a substance. It's just a taste. You see what I'm saying? So that taste in your mouth, it doesn't break your fast. Miswak also has fibers. And those fibers often break off while you're using it and can mix with your saliva and go into your throat. The default would be that it does not break your fast because it is not eating or drinking. As we mentioned earlier, if you see somebody using miswak, you wouldn't say to them, why are you eating that stick? You would say to them, why are you using miswak? And so if the fibers break off without your intent, without you purposely trying to chew them and eat them, but you're cleaning your teeth and the fiber falls off into your saliva and you swallow it, you didn't eat that piece of miswak, right? Even though it might have gotten into your throat, gotten inside of your body, because it's not eating or drinking. And the action of the Prophet ﷺ would support that. As far as the majority of the scholars, you will find them saying that no, if you put anything inside of your body, then it breaks your fast. And that's why some of the scholars say it's disliked to use miswak while fasting, because you can't stop that from happening. But the point is that the Prophet did it, and if I can't stop it from happening, that shows that it doesn't need to be stopped.
And he didn't specify it.
That's my point, yeah. So he let you do it. It doesn't need to be stopped because nobody considers that eating and drinking. And when we look, right, and this is where like the view of the Salaf sometimes can be extremely different from the view of the madhahib, especially later on. Because the view of the madhahib, especially later on, can be on the safe side, right? You have a large amount of people all listening to this one imam. How do you answer all of their questions? You give them a general answer. And a lot of times the common people, they can't understand nuance. They can't understand those specific little bitty details, right? What's the difference between me cleaning my tooth with a miswak and a piece of it falling off, getting into my spit without intention and me swallowing that, and between me chewing a stick and then swallowing it? What's the difference? The intention. And like right now, I'm biting the dead skin off of my lip. Was I eating the skin off of my lip? But if I started going and eating the skin off of my lip, that would be what? Eating the skin off of. What's the difference? Common people are often unable to differentiate between that nuance. They'll say the same thing. And so when giving an answer like that, we just say, okay, whatever then. Everything, you can't do it. Because it's too hard to make them understand that very subtle difference. But when you look at the madhab of the Salaf, from the Sahaba, the Tabi'in, you'll find a lot of times that those subtle differences are what they centered on. It's not eating, it's not drinking, right? Now, if you changed your mind and decided to eat a stick, well, you ate a stick, right, and that broke your fast. Yeah. But just using miswak to clean your teeth,
or like when you make wudu, it goes accidentally down your throat,
right? Or not even accidentally. The entirety of the water does not leave your mouth when you spit it out.
Right.
When you put the water in your mouth and there's still water in your mouth. It mixes with your saliva and then you swallow. Mm-hmm. Would anybody say you drunk? Everybody who saw what you just did would say you did what?
Spit it out.
You spit the water out. And they didn't have this minute, well, there's still some H2O inside of your mouth that you swallowed. Your spit. You swallow it all day long. Does anybody say that it breaks your fast? But if you purposely gather it all up into your mouth and then re-swallow it, what'd you do?
Drank it.
You drunk your spit. I would say, why are you drinking your spit? Okay, that's disgusting. Because in that situation, I can see the difference of what you did. And in that situation, that was drinking, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's how they looked at things. And so in this regard, when we see the Prophet ﷺ having this action, the taste of the miswak, some people say, well, no, you can use a miswak as long as it has no flavor, as long as it's natural, right? You know, some of the miswaks nowadays, they have lemon flavor and natural flavor. So they say you can use the lemon flavor. I mean, you can use the natural flavor, but you can't use the lemon flavor because the lemon flavor has sugars in it. And those sugars, when you're chewing on it, it mixes with your saliva and you swallow the saliva. And now it's not just flavor, it's actually sugar, substance. You see what I'm saying? Because now The taste of something, like this rug has a taste. But the sugar is an actual substance that has now mixed with your spit. And so they say you can't use the flavored ones. But we say, wow, flavor is flavor. Everything has a flavor. Everything has a taste.
That's true.
Right? And so, is it the best thing to do? You don't have to do it. And if you avoid it, we know for sure you're on the safe side. But if you used a lemon-flavored miswak to clean your teeth, did you eat or drink anything? So the flavor of it doesn't make a difference. And we're going to see a lot of narrations, maybe if not in this book, then in the Musannaf of Ibn Abi Shayba, who has a little bit more detail, where the Salaf, they didn't consider that to be something to break the fast. Not all of them. Some of them did, but not all of them. And that difference,
Majority of them did.
I wouldn't even say the majority. It's just, that's what I was going to say. That difference, it just shows you that the way common people look at things today, you would think there's no difference, right? You would think that because a large amount of scholars today say it, or very prominent scholars today say it, even if there's not a large amount, there's one or two major scholars who say it. You would think that that's the opinion. But the fact that you see that the Salaf disagreed in it shows you that the affair is vast. And a lot of times, these statements that are given by a large body of scholars or a very prominent scholar is being given to a person who isn't capable or qualified to handle the nuance. And that's something that a lot of students miss, that cause them to argue with each other. You'll see what did I just read today? Sheikh Al-Albani. Oh, Salat al-Tarawih. Is it better at home or in the masjid?
Which book?
It was a fatwa by it. You can find it in other books, but I was just listening to a statement. And not Al-Albani, but other, like, who was it? Sheikh Sulaiman al-Ruhaili, but before him it was it Bin Baz? I can't remember who it was. But they just simply said, no, it's better in the masjid, and whoever says it's not better it's better at home is wrong.
Who said that?
Huh?
Some sheikh.
A sheikh, right? Sheikh Al-Albani, Sheikh Bin Baz, Sheikh Sulaiman al-Ruhaili. Not Sheikh Sulaiman. It might have been Sheikh Sulaiman, but Sheikh Sulaiman clarified after that and said some people have the other opinion. But the point is that when they say whoever says this is wrong, do they mean whoever says it is wrong? And I'm right, you have to listen to me?
Sounds like it, I guess.
It sounds like it. But that's because we're talking to people who don't have nuance. You see what I'm saying? We don't want to give them all of this conversation and all of this nuance. They need to go worship Allah. Pray at the masjid. That's the opinion that I think is correct. And I'm going to tell you that the other opinion is wrong, i.e. for you. Why is it wrong for you? Because you asked me, because you don't know, and this is what I know, and I'm going to tell you what I know, and so therefore for you the other opinion is wrong. But the ulama who had the other opinion, are they by default saying the other scholar is wrong and you have to listen to me over that other scholar? No, they're saying, I think that opinion is wrong. But if you have evidence and you believe that, you can follow that opinion, no problem. And even if sometimes they might go further than that and like really criticize you because you have a different of opinion, if that opinion is founded in the way of the Salaf without error and fault, meaning you weren't in error in how you arrived at that opinion, right? It wasn't you misunderstanding the Salaf. Like we talked about one time, the brother, rahimahullah, who used to say that the istighfar after the salat is 6 times, right? And he would say that's the opinion of the Salaf. That's not the opinion of the Salaf. That's just you misunderstanding the opinion of the Salaf. So we can criticize that. But when you get to the opinion of the Salaf, when there's no error on you from understanding it or application, meaning you got to the opinion of the Salaf, but that opinion is still valid. Like, for example, somebody who tries to say it's okay to have intercourse with your wife from the rear because one of the Sahaba said it. You say, no, that Sahabi changed his mind, right? So when you get to the opinion of the Salaf, when you're not mistaken in how you understood it, and you're not mistaken in how you're applying it because it's still valid and you understood it correctly, then you're good to go. And nobody who says, when they say, generally speaking, that opinion is wrong, It's talking about you, right? They're talking about it generally speaking, that in my opinion, that opinion is wrong. But if another scholar had that opinion, it's okay. And if you follow the other scholar who has that opinion, it's okay. But you ask me, and that opinion is wrong to me. And so I'm going to tell you that opinion is wrong. But because we don't understand this a lot of times as students, we'll say, Sheikh so-and-so said that, so that opinion is wrong, and that's the end of it. And we don't know that, no, another Sheikh more qualified than that Sheikh, right? Or more knowledgeable or more abundant, because these opinions change from time to time based on the contemporary issues. Like right now, our mashayikh are a large group in a certain region. So that certain region will have an influence on what the people think the correct answer is. But when the body of scholarship historically was in a different region, and those scholars saw something different, the majority of the people during that time would have saw the position differently. You see what I'm saying? So if the scholarship is in Saudi, for example, when the scholarship was in India, they might have had a different outlook on it. And if they were the predominant scholarship of that time, or Yemen, or Syria, or Egypt, it would have changed the way people perceive things. So the point of it is that in this circumstance, when we look at this hadith of the Prophet ﷺ using miswak more than could be counted, it gives us the default of saying, well, then you can use miswak. And even if some of the fibers get in your mouth and go into your stomach, or if you get the taste of the miswak, it doesn't break your fast. طيب. قال عبد-الرزاق عن الثوري عن أبي نهيك عن زياد بن هدير الأسدي أنه قال ما رأيت رجلا أدأب للسواك من عمر بن الخطاب وهو صائم ولكن بعود قد ذوي يعني يبس. He says that on the authority of Abdur-Razzaq, on the authority of Thawri, on the authority of Abi Nahik, on the authority of Ziyad ibn Hudayr al-Asadi, who said, I never saw a man more commonly using miswak while he was fasting than Umar ibn al-Khattab. I've never saw somebody who habitually used miswak as much or so much while they were fasting than Umar ibn al-Khattab. Habitually, right? He constantly did it. So this is Umar al-Faruq using miswak while fasting all the time, not before dhuhr, after dhuhr, not worried about what breaks or what doesn't. But Ziyad, he said, but he used to only use a siwak that was dried out. And so some of the scholars, they differentiate between a miswak that is moist and a miswak that is dry. They say the miswak that is dry, you get the taste, but the taste doesn't break your fast, but nothing actually goes in. While the miswak that is moist, the moist branch, it has what inside of it? Liquid. You ever, like if you see a tree, the liquid goes through the tree, right? Goes through the branches and through the veins. And so the liquid will get into the branch, and if it's moist, it will, when you chew it, it will come out. It's like medicine, right? Like aloe, for example. You know what aloe is, right? Aloe vera, the plant. When you crack it open, you can put it on your wound. They call it sabr in Arabic, or sabir. That liquid inside is something, right? That's something, that's a medicine. Sometimes it can be bitter. Sometimes it can be flavorful, right? And so when you have this, when you have this moist miswak and you're chewing it to get the bristles to open up and things like that, it's putting the tree juice into your mouth. So does that break your fast? Right? Ziyad ibn Hudayr al-Asadi is saying that Umar, he used to avoid using a moist branch for that reason. Right? Because the dry one, when you chew it, nothing is coming out. And maybe the branches crumble. But that's why other scholars used to say, no, you can use a moist one, not a dry one. Because the moist one, the branches don't break off. The fibers don't crumble off. And you can spit out. But the dry one, when you use it, what happens? It crumbles apart. And that crumbling apart gets into your throat. And so you see them differing about this. But the Prophet ﷺ, what did he do? He used miswak. Did it mention what kind? And so you'll see that the Salaf had different opinions of it, but the generality is still there. He says, Abdur-Razzaq and Ma'mar and Qatada أن أبا هريرة رضي الله تعالى عنه قال لقد أدميت فمي اليوم صائما بالسواك مرتين. I like this narration, right? Abdur-Razzaq said on Ma'mar on Qatada that Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he said, I caused my mouth to bleed today while fasting using miswak twice.
Means you did it a lot.
He did it a lot because he did it more than once. He did it hard, caused his mouth to bleed, right? Also, what about the blood?
Does it break your fast?
It didn't break his fast. He did it twice. And he never said in the first time when I broke my fast I was bleeding, like hijama, right? Some blood mixes with my spit and I might have swallowed it, right? Are you constantly spitting out? If you get a busted lip or bleeding gums, are you constantly spitting that blood out? No, right? And it didn't break his fast. How do we know he didn't think it broke his fast?
He didn't say that.
He did it again. If he thought it broke his fast, he wouldn't have did it again. And so this narration is very helpful in this regard. He says, Abdur-Razzaq and Ibn Jurayj قال قلت لعطاء أيتسوك الصائم قال نعم قيل له أيزدرد ريقه قال لا قلت ففعل فأفطر قال لا ولكن ينهى عن ذلك قال قلت فإن ازدرده وهو يقال له إنه ينهى عن ذلك قال قد أفطر إذن غير مرة يقول ذلك نعم. He says that Abdur-Razzaq, so this is when it's subhanAllah, man, I love the Salaf. You start to see like the difference between like Ahl al-Hadith, Ahl al-Ra'i. When you read the books of the Salaf, you see how those different ideologies developed. And you start to see how the Tabi'een had more to deal with than the Sahaba, or went further than the Sahaba, right? Rahimahumullah, and they're from the Qurun al-Mufaddala. But if they went further than the Sahaba, and you can start to see how it develops, how far do you think some of us go from the Sahaba, right? So this narration, he says that Abdur-Razzaq said on the authority of Ibn Jurayj, who said, I said to Ata, can a person use the siwak while fasting? Ata said yes. He said, can he swallow his spit? If you're using the miswak and it builds up spit in your mouth, can you swallow it? Ata said no. So we see he went a step further. You see what I'm saying? Did the Salaf from Umar or the Prophet, did they say anything about that? And not only did they say anything about, they didn't even ask that question. Right? That showed like the fadl ilm al-salaf ala al-khalaf. Even though Ata is from the Tabi'een, Ibn Jurayj from the Atba' Tabi'een, the Sahaba was still better. The way they approached the religion. And with Ibn Jurayj and Ata compared to us, we start asking those extra questions, even more than they did. But he said to Ata, can he swallow his spit? He said no. So Ibn Jurayj, he asked the next question. If he does so, does it break his fast? Right. The default should be what? If I told you no, don't swallow your spit, the default should be what?
Yeah, it breaks your fast.
Right. But he still asked the question because, well. And Ibn Jurayj tells him, no.
Ibn Jurayj?
I'm sorry. Ibn Atta tells him, no, it doesn't.
Oh.
If you swallow your spit, it doesn't break your fast. Then why can't I swallow my spit?
Right.
But as we said, it's that nuance. Oh, you swallow your spit all day long. But when you tell me swallow your spit, I'm thinking about you that you're going to mean by that, you're going to start gathering your spit and swallowing it. You're going to start using miswak and letting that flavor gather in your spit and start swallowing it. So no, don't swallow your spit. You know how hard it would be all day long to not swallow your spit? It's impossible. But he told them no to put an end to that person who would try to take advantage because they don't have the nuance. But Ibn Jurayj, he needed, well, hold on, does it break your fast if you do it? Atta said no, it doesn't break your fast. But Ibn Jurayj, he said, but what about a person who was told not to do it? Don't swallow your spit. And then I said to him, if he swallows it after it, Atta said, no, you should not swallow your spit, but it doesn't break your fast. but you should be told not to do it, right? So a person uses miswak, no problem. Swallow their spit? No. What if they swallow their spit? Did it break their fast? No, but tell them not to do it. Okay, Ibn Jurayj says, what if I told them and they did it after that? Here, Atta said, Ibn Jurayj said, well, who yuqalu lahu? If he swallowed it and it was said to him, don't do that, Atta, he said, in that case, he broke his fast. How? Why did it break his fast when he did it the first place? If it breaks your fast, it breaks your fast. Do you have to be told not to eat a cheeseburger to know that it breaks your fast? Well, no, he ate it, but right? So there's arguments you can make, but he said in that case, if you told him not to do it, then it breaks his fast. After the first time you told him that. Right? And so that's just an example of, you can see how those extra questions lead to extra answers, lead to, is it right or wrong? And that's why I love the statement of the Salaf. Sticking to what you know is the Sunnah is better than figuring out if it's the Bid'ah. Don't use the miswak, no problem. I know not using the miswak is okay. Don't do it. Or I know using the miswak is the Sunnah. Do it and don't worry about it. But once you start asking those extra questions is where it becomes, okay, now we got to start thinking and reasoning and figuring out. And that's when whoever talks a lot, his mistakes become a lot. He says, قال Abdur-Razzaq and Abdullah ibn Umar and Nafi' أن ابن عمر رضي الله تعالى عنهما كان يستاك وهو صائم إذا راها إلى الصلاة الظهر. He says that Abdur-Razzaq said on the authority of Abdullah ibn Umar, who said on the authority of Nafi', who said on the authority of Ibn Umar رضي الله تعالى عنهما, that he used to use siwak while he was fasting when he would go to Dhuhr Salat. If he would use siwak while he was going to Dhuhr Salat, what does that mean? He used miswak after the time of Dhuhr. And so the people who say you can't use miswak after the time of Dhuhr, he did. Well, no, he was going to Dhuhr Salat. Yeah, that means they already called the what? Adhan. So it was after the time of Dhuhr, right? And so that qualification, or that qualification that they made where you can't use it after the time of Dhuhr, this is Ibn Umar using it after the time of Dhuhr. He says, Abdur-Razzaq and Ma'mar and man sami'a Maymun ibn Mihran يكره السواك للصائم آخر النهار فسألت الحسن فقال لا بأس به آخر النهار إنما هو طهور فليستك أوله وآخره. Abdur-Razzaq said on the authority of Ma'mar, on the authority of somebody who heard Maymun ibn Mihran, disliking using siwak for the fasting person at the end of the day. The end of the day is after Dhuhr. Right? You got the first part of the day is Fajr till Dhuhr, and the end of the day is Dhuhr until Maghrib. Right? That's what they mean by the end of the day. When they say the end of the day, they mean from Dhuhr until Maghrib. Maymun ibn Mihran disliked the person using siwak while fasting on the end of the day. The person who Ma'mar narrated on said, I asked Al-Hasan, or Ma'mar himself, he said, I asked Al-Hasan, yani Hasan al-Basri, and he said there's no problem using it at the end of the day. It is only something that is pure. So let him use the miswak at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day. Right, and that's the statement of Hasan al-Basri. قال Abdur-Razzaq and Ibn Jurayj قال قلت لعطاء ما ينهى عنه من السواك قال إذا كان السواك يابسا لا يأتي منه ماء قلت ما الذي يقال ماء السواك قال الريق الذي يكون عليه يأتي من قبل الرأس والفم قلت فإن كان السواك يابسا لا عصارة له قال نعم. Here Abdur-Razzaq, he says on Ibn Jurayj, he said, I asked Ata, what is prohibited from siwak? What can we not do with siwak, i.e. while fasting? Ata, he said, if the siwak is dry and no water comes out of it, i.e. it's okay to use. Ata, he said, then what is this stuff that we call siwak water? Right? There was a quality, like, so in Arabic, when we talk about water, there are things that are water with something else. Like you could say dirty water, hot water, salt water, right? That's water with something else. And then there are things that we call water, but aren't really water. They come from something else. Like, for example, Allah says He created humans from what? Ma'un dafiq, a gushing water. But is that water? No, that's not water at all, right? You hear some people talk about rose water. Rose water isn't water. It's the juice of the flower. It's the liquid of the flower, right? Here, Atta said you can use this siwak as long as it's dry, no water comes out of it, i.e. no liquid comes out of it. Ibn Jurayj, he asked him, well, what is this stuff that they call siwak water, miswak water? What is miswak water? This was a term that they had. Atta, he says, it is the spit or the saliva that is on the miswak, that comes from a person's head and their mouth, right? That is what some of them used to call siwak water, right? It's not really water. It's the spit that comes on the miswak when you're constantly chewing on it and things like that. It gets wet, it soaks it up, and it puts out water after that. We're talking about the dry miswak. Ibn Jurayj, he said, so if the miswak is dry and it doesn't have its own liquid to it, Atta said, yes, you can use it. I like the statement of, or like the action of Umar ibn al-Khattab. He says, أخبرنا Abdur-Razzaq قال أخبرنا ابن جريج قال أخبرني هشام عن عروة أنه كان يستن بالسواك الرطب وهو صائم. Abdur-Razzaq informed us, he said that Ibn Jurayj informed us, he said that Hisham ibn Urwa, informed me on the authority of his father that he used to yasten, i.e. he used to use the miswak. He used to brush with a miswak that was moist while fasting. So Urwa ibn Zubair, right, the famous scholar, he used to use a moist miswak while brushing, while fasting. Abdur-Razzaq and Al-Thawri wa ghayrihi, and one of the things to always look at this, like so far, who's been narrating a lot of these narrations? If you had to pick a person who narrated a lot of these narrations, the student who's narrating a lot of these narrations, Ibn Jurayj.
Oh, yeah.
Ibn Jurayj is, but we look, he's narrating from multiple people. He's learning from multiple teachers. Atta told him, no, it got to be dry. But Urwa is using a wet one, right? That is how a student learns. You don't know the mistakes of your teacher until you study with somebody else. And from the mistakes that happen often is that sometimes you find the student, whether rightly or wrongly, enamored by his teacher to the exclusion of everyone else. And it's important to diversify your studies, right? The Salaf, even though Ibn Jurayj is from the closest students of Atta, right? That's his sheikh. He didn't only take from Atta. He went and learned other places as well. And that's an important quality for the student, that they diversify their education. So here he narrates the story that Urwa used to brush with a siwak that was moist while fasting. He says, Abdur-Razzaq and Al-Thawri wa ghayrihi and Layth and Mujahid annahu lam yara bis-siwak al-ratbi ba'san lis-sa'im. Abdur-Razzaq said on the authority of Al-Thawri and other than him, on the authority of Layth ibn Sa'd, on the authority of Mujahid ibn Jabr, the student of Ibn Abbas, that he used to not see anything wrong with using a moist siwak while fasting. Mujahid said there's nothing wrong with using a moist siwak. And that's a classmate of Atta. Him and Atta were classmates, right? Both students of Ibn Abbas. Abdur-Razzaq, he says, وَهُوَ الَّذِي يَأْخُذْ بِهِ الثَّوْرِ. And this was the opinion that was adopted by Al-Thawri, Sufyan Al-Thawri, who had a madhab that rivaled the madhab of Abu Hanifa during his time. That was his madhab. He said, Abdur-Razzaq and Al-Thawri and Abi Ishaq and Amr ibn Shurahbil أنه قال لا تسوك بسواك رطب وأنت صائم فإنه يدخل في حلقك من طعمه. Abdur-Razzaq said on the authority of Al-Thawri, on the authority of Abi Ishaq, and like listen to these names, right? Abdur-Razzaq, As-Sun'ani, Imam. Al-Thawri, Sufyan Al-Thawri. And he had his own madhab that he said it was what? It was okay to use a moist miswak. That was his opinion. On the authority of Abi Ishaq as-Sabi'i was equivalent to az-Zuhri during his time, right? On the authority of Amr ibn Shurahbil, who said, don't use a miswak that is moist. So here we have the student of the student having a different opinion than his teacher's teacher. It's okay as a student to have an opinion other than your teacher. It doesn't mean you can't respect that opinion, transmit that opinion, tell that opinion, but it doesn't mean you have to be bound to that opinion if you have credence for another opinion. Where you approached it correctly and that opinion is applicable, then it's okay, because Thawri had his own madhab, even though he's narrating the narration of a person who said, no, it's not okay. Amr ibn Shurahbil, he said, don't use a miswak that is moist while fasting, because the flavor of it gets into your throat. He said, Abdur-Razzaq and Ma'mar and Qatada, أنه كان يكره جريد الرطب يتسوك به الصائم من أجل طعمه. On the authority of Abdur-Razzaq, on the authority of Ma'mar, who said on the authority of Qatada, that he used to dislike using the moist bark or the moist branch to do siwak with while fasting because of the flavor. Abdur-Razzaq and Thawri and Salamat ibn Kuhayl and Mujahid أنه كان يكره السواك للصائم آخر النهار. طيب, we mentioned that Mujahid earlier didn't have a problem with it. Here it says Abdur-Razzaq on Thawri, on Salamat ibn Kuhayl, on Mujahid, that he used to dislike using siwak at the end of the day. Is that a contradiction? Mujahid didn't care what kind of siwak you use.
At the end of the day.
He just disliked you using it
At the end of the day.
You see what I'm saying? And so that's an important thing to consider. Like, sometimes a person might think it's a contradiction, and it's not. Right? He's talking about two different things. One was about moist versus wet. This is about beginning of the day, end of the day. Another benefit is that I agreed with this sheikh in this opinion. I can use it all day long. I agreed with Hassan al-Basri. I can use it all day long. I agreed with Mujahid that I can use wet or dry. But I disagree with Mujahid that I can't use it at the end of the day. You don't have to agree with everything they say, even if you agree with one thing they say. And that leads to another issue, which is a big issue in usul al-fiqh, which is called talfiq. One of the ways of combining madhabs, right? Can I take from this madhab an opinion and that madhab an opinion? Scholars have varying statements about that, right? But that's the issue of, do you have to agree with everything that the person says if you agreed with them in something? Now, he says, Abdur-Razzaq and Thawri and Ubaidah and Ibrahim أنه قال لا بأس بالسواك أول النهار وآخره للصائم. He says that Abdur-Razzaq said on the authority of Thawri, on the authority of Ubaidah, on the authority of Ibrahim al-Nak'i. He said there's nothing wrong with using siwak at the beginning of the day or at the end of it. Abdur-Razzaq and بعض أصحابه and al-Hakim ibn Aban and Ikrimah and Ibn Abbas رضي الله تعالى عنهما أنه قال لا بأس بالسواك الأخضر للصائم. Abdur-Razzaq, he said on some of his teachers, on the authority, or some of his companions, on the authority of al-Hakim ibn Aban, on the authority of Ikrimah, on the authority of Ibn Abbas رضي الله تعالى عنهما, who said there's nothing wrong with using a green siwak while fasting. A green siwak is that moist, fresh siwak, right? And so Ibn Abbas has this statement that it doesn't matter wet or dry, you can use it. Abdur-Razzaq, he said, قال لا أعلم إلا أن مسلمة أخبرني. In that narration, we see that Abdur-Razzaq said on some of his companions, some of his classmates. Later on in the narration, he says, I don't think it was anybody other than Maslama. And so that's just an honesty in narration. I can't remember who it was. So when I narrated, I'm not going to say who told me because I can't remember. But I think it was Maslama. So that's just an honesty in narration that you benefit when studying the hadith, right? In the narration. That's about using siwak. What is something else that people put in their mouth while fasting that they don't eat?
Toothbrush, toothpaste.
That's siwak. Toothbrush, toothpaste is equivalent to siwak.
Yeah.
Right. What's something else? Gum. Yes.
That has flavors and sugars.
So does miswak.
Sugars.
So does miswak. And that's the question. Now that we've understood miswak, does gum break your fast? Right?
I thought it did.
If you think about the flavor argument, the sugar argument, and you say it does, then why don't you say the same thing about miswak?
Does it have calories?
What is this calories? When does Sahaba start counting calories? Right? But, you see what I'm saying? That's how we look at things. Man, I didn't think about gum. Do you eat gum?
Chew it.
You chew gum. You don't eat gum. You see what I'm saying? What breaks your fast?
Eating.
Drinking and intercourse. Nobody ever says, why you eating that gum? Stop eating that gum. They say what?
Stop chewing that gum.
Stop chewing that gum.
Stop smacking that gum.
All right? Stop smacking on that gum. Spit that gum out.
Right.
So, does chewing gum break your fast? Or do we say the same thing we said about miswak? Flavorless gum is okay, but flavored gum is not okay. Right? We see some of the setup differentiated. Wet miswak breaks your fast. Dry miswak doesn't. Do we say the similar thing about gum? Flavored gum breaks your... Because what is gum? Right? Right, nowadays we think of gum as gum, bubble gum, right? But they had gum back then. What is gum?
Oh, for real?
Of course. You think we was the first people in the world to have gum?
Yes.
And that's a good point, because a lot of times people think that we're the first people to do stuff.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? They had gum for a long time, right?
So they had gum back then?
Of course. What is gum? It's just a chewy thing with flavor.
Right.
Where do they make it from? Nowadays they make it from chemicals. It's sap, right? From a tree. It's a chewy leaf that you can't, that you don't swallow, right? It's just gum. And so in Arabic it's called ilk, right? So this babul ilk lis-sa'im, chapter regarding gum for a fasting person. Abdur-Razzaq and Ibn Jurayj قال قلت لأطاء أيمضغ الصائم علكا قال لا قلت إنه ينفث ريق العلك ولا يزدرده ولا يمصه قال فإن لم يزدرد ريقه فإنه مروى له فإن ازدرد ريقه وهو يقول إنه ينهى عن ذلك فقد أفطر. Abdur-Razzaq, he said on the authority of Ibn Jurayj, he said, I said to Ata, can a fasting person chew gum? Ata said no. Ibn Jurayj, he said, I said, ينفث ريق العلك. He spits the saliva of the gum out, right? Yanfudhu, he blows out. He spits out the saliva and the pieces of the gum out, and he doesn't swallow it, and he doesn't suck it, like a Jolly Rancher, for example, right? Can you eat a piece of hard candy where you suck it?
Right. You ain't eating it though.
Yes, you are.
No, like the gum.
Gum, you just chew it. You don't eat it.
He's spitting it out, he was saying.
But the piece of hard candy, what do?
You suck on it.
Until it what?
Until it disappears.
What are you doing? What are you doing? Say it in English.
You ate it.
You ate a piece of what kind of candy you eating? You see what I'm saying?
Right.
Because you put that piece of candy in your mouth and you let it dissolve and go away. That's different than chewing gum. That's different than using siwak. Right. You see what I'm saying? And when we look at words, we see our words even reflect that. Right? So he says he doesn't swallow the spit of the gum, and he doesn't suck on it. Right? He doesn't, like a lollipop, like a popsicle. He's not just sucking on it until it goes away. Atta said if he doesn't swallow the saliva, فَإِنَّهُ مَرْوَى لَهُ, then it's something that cools him off. Or something that, like when you're chewing the gum, it removes a little bit of what you have from the parchness and from the hunger, right? People chew gum when they're hungry, when they're thirsty, to get away from it, right? So it's a marwa. Marwa is from rawa, right? It quenches him, right? I was trying to see if they explained it here, but they don't. But it quenches. It's from right? It quenches him. Chewing the gum, if you're not swallowing it, then it quenches you. Is he saying that to say no still, or is he saying that to say it's okay? It seems that he's saying it to say no still. Even if you don't swallow it, it's doing what?
So you're quenching
You're quenching your thirst. Be thirsty, man. You're fasting. right? That's the point. You're supposed to, right? Why are you trying to get away from the hardship, right? So he says, even if he doesn't swallow it, it is a quenching of his needs. But if he swallows the spit, i.e. then no, for sure it broke his fast, right? According to Atta. But if he swallows it after he was told not to do so, then he's broken his fast, right? That's what Atta says. قال أخبرنا عبد-الرزاق قال أخبرنا معمر قال سمعت قتادة يسأل عن العلك فقال إني لأكرهه للصائم وغير الصائم. Here he says, Abdur-Razzaq informed us, he said that Ma'mar informed us, who said, I heard Qatada being asked about gum. And so he said, I dislike it for the person who's fasting and the person who isn't fasting. They used to consider the person who chewed gum to be one who looks foolish. They say, it looks foolish, don't chew gum. And so you found a lot of salaf that used to dislike a person who chewed gum. Right? It was from the things that were bad etiquette. Like, is that applicable today? Maybe, but maybe not, right? Like, for example, can you chew gum in class? Can you chew gum when you meet somebody important? If you're going somewhere important, you just smacking on some gum, they would say, what about you? Don't do that, Akhi. Why are you chewing gum? You got a big meeting today. Right? You're going to meet the president of the trucking company or the business that you work. You're going to meet your wife's father for the first time. Or your potential wife's father for the first. You're going to go in there smacking on some gum? I don't like it for the person who's fasting or the person who isn't fasting. Right? They would say because chewing on gum would make you look like a fool. And it's not from the etiquette of men. Right? Men don't. For example, like these, and this is why I love this setup, because they teach us how to be men, and things that we might have had in our culture, we see that the Salaf had it too. And unfortunately, nowadays you find culture trying to get rid of it, right? Let a boy play with a Barbie. You know what I mean? Let them, but things, how does a boy eat an ice cream cone? He should eat it the way men eat ice cream cones, right? Do you eat the ice cream cone? Oh, right? You'd be like, Akhi, stop, what are you doing? It's not how a man eats an ice cream cone. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
That looks out of place. Pause. Like how you eat it. Like, don't eat it like that. Because men have ways that they do things. And like this is an etiquette. Men don't chew gum. Right?
That's like more for women.
I mean, you look like a fool. It's more for animals. Cows. You ever seen a cow? And that's the saliva dripping off. That's an animal, man. You're a human being, man. What you doing chewing gum like that? And so, are we saying it's haram? Are we saying that that culture is still applicable today? If I saw somebody chewing gum today, would I reject this hadith and say he's a fool? He doesn't know the sunnah. He doesn't know the way of the salaf, right? Maybe not, but it puts us into that mind state, man. This is how the salaf work. Abdur-Razzaq and al-Thawri and Mansur and Ibrahim and Jabir and al-Sha'bi kariha al-ilq lis-sa'im. Abdur-Razzaq said on the authority of al-Thawri, on the authority of Mansur, on the authority of Ibrahim, as well as on the authority of Jabir, on the authority of al-Sha'bi, the two of them, i.e. Ibrahim and al-Sha'bi, both disliked gum for the fasting person. He says, Bab al-Madmada lis-Sa'im. Making madmada for the person that's fasting. Swishing the water around in your mouth while fasting. As we already talked about, it's okay. You have to do it. But you shouldn't be extensive. You shouldn't purposely get it into your throat. But at the same point in time, the flavor, the water has a flavor. And that flavor gets into your mouth. That flavor mixes with your spit. Even droplets of water that are still in your mouth. Right? So, do we go to extremes? No. This chapter is about having madmada while fasting. Abdur-Razzaq and Ibn Jurayj قال سألت عطاء أن المضمضة للصائم لغير الصلاة. This is an addition that should have been made. When not making wudu, can you gargle and swish water in your mouth? You're hot, your mouth is dry, your lips are chapped. Can you just put some water in your mouth and spit it out?
I don't see why not.
Right? So, some of the setup they used to dislike it while others said it was okay. Here he says, Abdur-Razzaq on Ibn Jurayj, who said, I asked Ata about doing madmada for the faster for purposes other than salat. He said, ما أكرهه إلا لقول أبي هريرة. He says, I don't dislike it except because of the statement of Abu Hurairah, who said, خلوف فم الصائم أطيب عند الله من ريح المسك. I don't dislike it except for the fact that I heard Abu Hurairah saying, the bad breath of the faster, or the breath of a faster, is more pleasant to Allah than the smell of musk. And so by swishing that water around, you're getting rid of it. So I don't like it for that reason. But other than that, it's okay. I mean, you do it for wudu, you do it for other than wudu. He says, Abdur-Razzaq and Ma'mar and Qatada قال لا بأس أن يزدرد الصائم ريقه. Abdur-Razzaq said on the authority of Ma'mar, on the authority of Qatada, who said there's no harm for a person to swallow his own spit. Right? And that shows us that madmada, after you spit the water out, what's left in your mouth is your own spit. He says, Abdur-Razzaq and Ibn Jurayj قال قلت لعطاء فمضمض وهو صائم ثم أفرغ الماء أيضره أن يزدرد ريقه قال لا يضره وماذا بقي في فيه. Abdur-Razzaq said on the authority of Ibn Jurayj, who said, I said to Ata, he makes madmada. A person makes madmada while fasting. And then he pours the water out. He spits the water out. Does it harm him after that to swallow his spit? Ata said it doesn't harm him. And what's left in his mouth after that? These type of questions, they show us that this, and I use the word pig-headedness, but that might be too harsh. These very detailed questions didn't escape the Salaf, right? So the people nowadays who think, well, no, the Salaf didn't ask that question. They didn't think about it like that. No, they thought about it like that. They just also thought that, why are you being so extra? Does a drop of water left in your mouth and you make and you spit it out, but there's 3 drops of water left in your mouth, does that break your fast because you swallowed it after that? Did they think of questions like that? Yeah, Atta just asked it. I mean, Ibn Jurayj just asked it, but Atta told him what? No, what's left in your mouth after you spit it out? If you spit out the water, would anybody still say, why you still got water in your mouth? They say you spit out the water. Well, there might be 7 particles, there might be 3 H2O particles in his mouth. Get out of here, man. What's left in your mouth after that? And so what's left is spit. And so spit is spit. No, it doesn't break your fast. He says, Abdur-Razzaq and Ibn Jurayj قال سأل إنسان عطاء يتسحر الصائم ثم يجد قبل الصلاة في أسنانه شيء. A student just asked me about this today. قال ليس عليه في ذلك شيء وما ذاك قد مضمضت. قال قلت قد كان ينهى أن يمضمض الصائم عند الفطر فيمجها في الأرض قبل أن يسيغ شيئا. قال ما أكره ذلك إلا لقول أبي هريرة. Here he says on the authority of Abdur-Razzaq, on the authority of Ibn Jurayj, who said, a man asked Ata about a person who is taking sahur before fasting. And then he finds before Salah, i.e. before Salat al-Fajr, some food left over in his teeth. Does that break his fast?
You can swallow it.
No, that's what happens.
Oh, you swallow
You
it?
got the food left over in your teeth. You chewed a cookie, right?
Yeah.
The crumble, the chewed cookie in your molars, there's going to be cookie in there.
You're gonna have some.
You had some popcorn. There's going to be kernels in your mouth, right? You did all of that. Then you made wudu, but it's still there. And then you go to salat. Oops. Right? Does that break your fast? Ata says, وَمَا ذَاك? What's wrong with that? And you've already made madmada. Right? You're worried about the little bit of food that's left in your teeth. You've already made madmada. 1, you did the best you could do. 2, there's water in your mouth now. You see what I'm saying? Why are you worried about the little popcorn kernel when you've already poured water into your mouth? Right? You've already made madmada. You did the best. You tried to wash it out. And you've also put water in your mouth. Ata says, I said, but they used to tell people to not make madmada when fasting at the time of making fitr. When you go to iftar, they used to tell people to not make madmada and then spit the water out. So some of the things that people used to do is that when it was time for iftar, before making iftar, you hear the adhan, Allah, or either before the adhan, but most of the time, sometimes after the adhan, they would rinse their mouth out before taking iftar. This is something you should not do. Don't do that, right? The sunnah is if you're going to rinse your mouth out, swallow that water, right? And then swallow it, right? Don't spit it out. There's a whole chapter of this in Musannaf ibn Abi Shayba, but that's what you should do. It's not the sunnah to rinse your mouth out at all. It's the sunnah to do what? Break your fast as fast as you can. But if you're going to rinse your mouth out, don't spit it out because you don't know where the barakah is. You see what I'm saying? And so they used to tell people who are going to do iftar, don't do madmada and spit it out. Like, here he took it as don't do madmada.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
Right. But the reality of it, when you look at the other narrations, is don't do madmada and spit it out. That's a difference from saying don't do madmada and spit it out.
So just break it like that.
Yeah, if you're going to do madmada, swallow it. But some of them took it as don't do madmada. And so you see how you can, like we just said, if the statement you get from the Salaf, you got there and you didn't misunderstand it. Even the Salaf could misunderstand a statement from another Salaf. Don't do madmada. Now, he's not saying don't do madmada. He's saying don't do madmada and spit it out. So he says they used to tell the people to not do madmada and spit it out if they were going to do iftar. So to not do madmada when fasting at the time of iftar and then spit it out on the ground. Before an yasira shay'a. Qabla an yasira shay'a. Before he enjoys it a little bit. Right? If you're going to spit it out later, that's fine, but enjoy it a little bit first. Right? Swallow a little bit. Right? I say, right, my thoughts on this was, why is it wrong to do? Because it delays you from breaking your fast. Right? And the sunnah is what? To hasten to breaking your fast. And so here, you put the food in your mouth and we're ready to break your fast, but instead of breaking your fast, you spit it back out and fast it a little bit more. So that's one of the reasons why I say I think it could possibly be disliked because of that reason. Right? Because it encourages you to delay your fast. And also, a non-obvious reason is that fasting, that dryness in your mouth, that bad breath that you're going to mix with the water, that bloody gums because your mouth is so parched. All of that is what? Barakah.
It's barakah?
Why not? Why is it that way?
Because it's for Allah.
Because you did all of that for Allah. You were fasting. This is ibadah. Those are the results of ibadah. Right? When you're making sujood, do you dust yourself off? Why not? When you make sujood on the ground and you're praying on the ground and your forehead comes up dusty and your nose is dusty and your knees are dusty, do you dust yourself off? Why not?
Are we told not to?
Yeah. And that's ibadah. I'm dirty in the path of Allah. The nose that breathes in the dust won't breathe in the hellfire, right? Like, these are type of things that this is ibadah that I got this bad result from. And so that, I want to take the barakah of that. I want to get the bit. That's why I say it's the less obvious thing. You see what I'm saying? Like, am I saying 100% that your spit is barakah? No. But I hope that there's barakah in that backwash or that dirty mouth water for when you first break your fast. Because your bad breath is something that's pleasing to Allah. Right? Why would I want to spit that out and get rid of it? And the Salaf used to consider things like this. Right? Everything wasn't obvious. Right? Some things were spiritual. Some things were, man, this is barakah. Why are you going to get rid of that? Right? So he said they used to tell the people to not do madmada while fasting at the time of fitr and then spit it out on the ground before enjoying it a little bit. Atta said, I don't dislike that. I mean, if you're going to spit it out, it's okay. If you're going to do madmada and then spit it out before breaking your fast, that's fine. Except the qawl of Abu Hurairah. The only reason I dislike it is because of the statement of Abu Hurairah. Right? Don't get rid of your bad breath. Don't get rid of your khuluf. He said, Abdur-Razzaq and Ma'mar and man sami al-Hasan. يقول رأيت عثمان بن أبي العاص أو أبي العاص بعرفة وهو صائم يمج الماء ويصب على نفسه الماء. قال وكان الحسن يمضمض وهو صائم ثم يمجه وذلك في شدة الحر. Abdur-Razzaq, he said on the authority of Ma'mar, on the authority of the one who heard from Al-Hasan, yani Hasan al-Basri. That person, he said, Hasan al-Basri, he said, I saw Uthman ibn Abil Asi, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, on Arafah while fasting, right? So he's fasting the 9th of Arafah, right? The day of Arafah, he's fasting it, even though it's not necessarily the sunnah for the person who's making Hajj to fast the day of Arafah, right? But he did it, and he was fasting. Maybe he wasn't making Hajj, maybe it was on Arafah at a different time, or maybe he just did a different opinion in that regard, right? Because for us, those who aren't making Hajj, it's the sunnah for us to fast Arafah. But for somebody making Hajj, it's not the sunnah to fast Arafah. Allah knows best. But he said, I saw Uthman ibn Abil Asi on Arafah while fasting, and he was spitting out the water, right? He would put water in his mouth and spit it out, and he would pour water on himself. And he said, and Hassan used to do madmada while fasting, and then he would spit it out, and that's when it was really hot. And so this gives us a couple of benefits. One, the topic of doing madmada and spitting it out. But also, can I do things to alleviate the pain and the difficulty I go through when fasting, or do I have to experience it? Can I do something to alleviate the difficulty that I go through in fasting, or do I have to experience it? I can alleviate the difficulty. I can turn the air conditioner up, right? Some of the Salaf, they used to dislike it, but the reality of it is I can turn the AC on. I can take a pill at Fajr time to suppress my hunger. You see what I'm saying? Like they have diet pills and things like that that suppress your hunger. If I take that before Fajr, that's okay. Akhi, what are you doing? Taking a diet pill? You gotta be hungry when you fasting. No, Akhi, you can take a diet pill and suppress your hunger. It's okay. It's not haram. Because the Salaf, they used to do things to alleviate the difficulty that they might find while fasting, especially when that difficulty was hard. Like on a really hot day, take a cold bath. Can I sleep during the daytime in Fajr? I mean, and while fasting, can I sleep in the daytime of Ramadan? Huh?
Yeah, it's gonna make it easier.
Yeah, you see what I'm saying? Some of the Salaf, they would say, no, don't sleep during the daytime of Ramadan. But it's okay, right? I get off of work at 3, I take a nap. I pray Asr, or now it's 4. But when it was at 3, I pray Asr, I take a nap until Maghrib. Right? Akhi, but no, you missed the Qaylula. I'm taking the Qaylula, but no, Akhi, you gotta, that's the hard part of the day. You gotta experience it, you gotta enjoy it. It's barakah in that, right? It's a good time, the suffering, the reward. It's a good time. The reward is based on the amount of the difficulty.
It's a good time to suffer.
Al-ajr al-thawab ala qadr al-mashaqqa, aw kama qala sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Talking about Hajj, the reward is based on the amount of the difficulty that you endure. It was hard. They used to praise people who would fast the summer months, fasting those 15-hour, 18-hour days. That's a different type of fast than fasting in the winter months.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Right? But that's the praise. That's how you know that person was about their Islam. You know what I mean? He did those summer months. But I want to turn the AC on. I want to sit and relax. It's okay. They used to put stones on their belly. So that's one issue. It's okay to do things to relieve the difficulty of fasting, especially when it's extremely difficult. But alhamdulillah, we find that the faster, they usually have an ease. And that's from the wisdoms of Allah legislating us fasting together. That Ramadan, it's so much easier to fast than any other time because everybody does it. It makes it easy. But another benefit in this hadith, which is a very clever one, most people won't get it. We talked about it earlier, but before you came. Entering something into your body in a way other than eating or drinking, does it negate your fast? Like a shot?
Yeah.
Does it break your fast?
That's not eating, though.
Well, you put something inside of your body.
Yeah, but you did not eat.
Is it similar to eating? Because when we say eating or drinking, like for example, we include snorting. Snorting isn't eating or drinking, but we include that. You see what I'm saying? Because the Prophet said, "Balig bil madmada wal istinshaq."
It's because it goes through the throat.
Exactly, because it gets inside of your body.
Because that's how you eat.
So some people say, however it gets inside of your body, it breaks your fast. So if you get a shot, it breaks because it got inside of your body. If you put it in through the rear side, like they used to do with medicine, it got inside of your body. Does getting something inside of your body break your fast? Atta, in the previous chapter, we mentioned it, he said yes. But this is a narration that shows you that some people say no. Because what would he do? Uthman ibn Abil Asi, what would he do? He would pour water on himself. When you're pouring the water on yourself, what does that water do? And this is something we don't think about, but it shows you how clever the Salaf were to derive this result from it.
Would it absorb it, maybe?
Yeah, your skin absorbs it. And it gets inside of your body. And it cools you off. That's how it cools you. It gets inside of your body and it soothes you. Right? So that water that he sat in, or that water that bath that he took,
That pool, swimming.
that's getting inside of his skin and getting inside of his body and quenching his thirst without him drinking it. Did it break his fast? So just because I quenched my thirst, just because I alleviated my hunger, doesn't mean I broke my fast. And so a shot doesn't break my fast. A topical cream, like some medicine that I might rub on, right? And it gets into my skin. It doesn't break my fast. One of the narrations we mentioned was the statement of Sufyan al-Thawri, a person who injects alcohol. He takes a needle and sticks alcohol into his veins.
They had needles back then?
Yeah. So if they
take
poke alcohol into their body, it just... Sufyan al-Thawri was of the opinion that anything that goes inside of you breaks your fast. So he said it breaks your fast, but you don't get the punishment for drinking alcohol because you didn't drink alcohol, right? Even though it probably still get you drunk, right? Now, does it mean it's halal? No, it doesn't mean it's halal. You see what I'm saying? It's still intoxicating, so it's still haram, right? People misinterpret that all the time, right? They'll say something like, well, this action isn't intercourse. Okay, it's not intercourse. It's still haram, right? Kissing and holding hands ain't intercourse. It's still haram. You can't do it. Sticking alcohol into yourself, using marijuana face cream,
right? Yeah,
it's still haram. But you don't get the same punishment levied against you in this life for doing it. And so the point of it is that this Sahabi, Uthman ibn Abil Asi, shows us that pouring the water on your body doesn't negate your wudu, even though it quenches your thirst, even though it, in our Shaykh Abu Salah, Hafidhullah, he says that even if some of it gets into your mouth, you're pouring the water on your head, where's it going to go in? Your ear. You ever took a shower and the water gets in your ear and gets in your throat? You're pouring the water on your face and it gets in your nose and gets in your mouth. But are you drinking the water? No. So what about if a little drop or two got in your mouth? What about if a little bit got in your mouth? Are we going to say it broke your fast? And so that's just something to consider. And then Hasan al-Basri, he used to do that while fasting when it was extremely hot, right? He would gargle the water and then spit it out. Abdur-Razzaq and al-Thawri and Mansur and Salim ibn Abil Ja'd قال لا أعلمه إلا عن عمر قال إذا كان أحدكم صائما فأفطر فلا يمضمض ثم يمجه ولكن ليشربه فإن أوله خيره ولا يمسح يده بالمنديل حتى يلعقها أو يلعقها. And this is the narration we talked about a second ago. He said, Abdur-Razzaq on the authority of al-Thawri, on the authority of Mansur, on the authority of Salim ibn Abil Ja'd, who said, I don't know this narration to be from anybody other than Umar, yani Ibn al-Khattab, who said that if one of you all is fasting and he breaks his fast, then he should not do madmada and then spit it out, but instead he should drink it, because the best of it is the first part, right? The best part of your iftar, the most blessed part of your iftar is the first morsel. And so if you were putting it in your mouth, that's where all the barakah is. And if you're spitting it out, you wasted all of that. So don't put it in your mouth and then spit it out, because awwaluhu khayruhu, the first part of it is the best part. He said, and likewise, none of you should wipe your hand on a napkin until he licks it, and he licks it or sucks it, right? Until he licks his fingers. A couple of more, he says, Abdur-Razzaq and Ma'mar qala ukhbirtu أن قتادة مضمض مرة وهو صائم عند الفطر ثم مجها فقال له رجل أليس يكره هذا؟ قال بلى ولكن نسيت. Allahu Akbar. Allah al-Salaf. Allah al-Salaf. Abdur-Razzaq on Ma'mar, who said, I was informed that Qatada did madmada while fasting once at the time of breaking the fast. So at iftar, he put the water in his mouth, switched it around, and then he spit it out. And so a man said to him, isn't that makruh? Shouldn't you not do that? And he said, yeah, you're right, I forgot. Right, the salaf so easy. Yeah, I forgot. People forget, right? It's not wajib, I don't care. Some people say it, but it's okay. No, I forgot, right? And it's Qatada, Hafiz al-Dunya. The most famous memorizer of all time.
Right.
I forgot. Ahnu Bashar. He said, Abdur-Razzaq.
That's a good, like if you see a sheikh do something.
Exactly.
And look at him, he's doing this or something.
Maybe he forgot.
Yeah.
Or maybe when the sheikh tells you something, maybe he forgot. Right? All of these things go together and we learn from them in unison, right? It's not just about the madmada in this case. It's about, like you say, looking at how to, telling your teacher he did something wrong, right? This man just told Qatada you did, ain't that makruh? You're right, I forgot. The humility of the teacher to be like, yeah, I forgot. You know what I mean? All of those things are valid. Abdur-Razzaq and Ibn Jurayj قال أخبرت أن أبي بكر ابن عبد الرحمن أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وهو بالعرج كان يصب على رأسه من الماء وهو صائم. نعم هذا جيد. Abdur-Razzaq said on the authority of Ibn Jurayj, who said, I was informed about Abi Bakr ibn Abdurrahman that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, while at Arj, and Arj is a valley in the area of Hijaz between Mecca and Medina, and it's south of Medina about 113 kilometers. So while the Prophet was at Al-Arj, he used to pour water on his head while fasting. So that shows us, you pouring water on your head, right? While fasting. It might get in your mouth, it might get in your nose, but the Prophet did it. And so it's okay to do. And they weren't that extra in the way that they approached the religion. Abdur-Razzaq and Ibn Uyayna and Sumayyin and Abi Bakr ibn Abdurrahman and the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam خرج في رمضان يوم الفتح صائما فلما أتى العرج شق عليه الصيام وكان يصب الماء على رأسه وهو صائم. Abdur-Razzaq, he said on the authority of Ibn Uyayna, on the authority of Sumay, on the authority of Abi Bakr ibn Abdurrahman, that the Prophet ﷺ, he left out during Ramadan, the day of the conquest of Mecca. And that was in the 8th year of Hijrah, while fasting. But when they got to Al-Arj, fasting became hard. Right? It became hard to fast. And so he would pour water on his head while fasting. Right? To cool himself off, to relax, to make it easier. After that, there are other narrations that tell us they broke their fast. The Prophet commanded them to break their fast. Right? They were traveling. And it's too hard. Right? They said, Ya Rasulullah, the people are suffering from the fast. So he told them to break their fast. Right. And then some of the people still didn't do it. And so he did it. He said, it's not righteousness to fast while traveling.
So he poured the water on his head.
Right.
That's when he did it?
He did it before that, though.
Okay.
He did it. It was hard. Oh, man, it's hard.
Okay.
A little while later, it don't get easier.
It's still hard. Yeah.
It's like, you know what? Nah, it's too hard for y'all. Everybody just break your fast. But this is the messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam doing that. You see what I'm saying? So it shows you how we should act. It shows you that even though the Sahaba had the allowance to break their fast from the jump, a lot of them wanted to do what? Fast. Keep fasting. Because you don't want to miss the virtue of that day of Ramadan like we talked about last time. But when it becomes hard, man, break your fast. Right? Because it's not righteousness to fast while traveling. We'll stop at that amount. Inshallah, we'll pick back up tomorrow. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك اشهد ان لا اله الا انت استغفرك واتوب اليك.